And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is IDAGIO live, and this is very live tonight. I can tell you, as you can see, well, what can I tell you? Uh, this is the place where classic music happens, and I can promise you that it's happening all over the world tonight. One of the fun things about this series, or any of the IDAGIO live series, ours and everybody's, is this idea of people coming together as if it was in their living room from disparate parts of the world to talk about music and wonderful subjects. And tonight we have a fantastic subject. We're incredibly grateful to IDAGIO to invite Hampsong Foundation to have their own series on Tuesdays called Song and Beyond. And we are certainly beyond. I got stuck in the woods in eastern Styria today. I had a great walk. It's beautiful weather here, but I'm afraid that the signposts are not entirely accurate in terms of how long it takes you to get off the mountain you've climbed in the afternoon. Never mind. Everybody else is coming in from Maryland, from Atlanta, from Stuttgart. We're going to have a great time here. Our theme this month for Song and Beyond is in inviting authors of our various radio programs that are on Hampsong Foundation that we've done with WFMT over the years, both a Song of America as well as a Song Mirror of the World series, 26 programs that you can, by the way, visit Hampsong Foundation and listen to. But we thought we'd invite some of the authors this month to walk us through some of their programs, and if we could, get some of their guests. So tonight is sort of a fantastic opportunity because the woman, well, on my screen anyway, right beneath it is Christie Finn. Christy Finn is the managing director of the Hampsong Foundation, and she's also, yeah, exactly. I hope a lot of people are clapping around the world. Yeah, amazing job. You're incredible. Well, she wrote the story, and tonight's theme is There Is No Gender in Music. And that is a direct quote from one of my favorite ladies and one of the great, what should I say, mentors and composers in my life early on in my career, Eleanor Remick Warren, who in fact left me her music library. I recorded a great many of her pieces, and she used to do radio programs herself. And this was a quote that came up in a very long interview that she did on public radio many years ago, as well as some articles written with her and with Virginia Borton, her biographer, who unfortunately Virginia died a couple of years ago. So there we are. Eleanor Remick Warren. Anyway, Christy, I'm going to bounce it over to you. The ladies will introduce themselves. You are going to lead this. I'm either going to lose connection out here in the woods. A bear is going to eat me. We did see some beautiful ibex this afternoon. Unbelievable. I mean, just literally 5 feet in front of my face, which was really exciting. But the other thing is I'm running a little bit low on battery. What a day. I love it. Christy, off to you. No gender in music. Please introduce our guest and punt this into play.
Well, thank you, Tom, for calling us from the woods. And we will miss you in case we lose you, which is entirely possible. But we are so thrilled that we could have two wonderful composers join us today. So we have Lori Laitman and we have B.E. Boykin, or Brittany. We're going to call you Brittany if that's okay. And we're representing, if you don't mind if I say, we're representing sort of two generations of female composers. And Lori, many of you probably know her. If you don't know her from our radio program, maybe from some song concerts that you've gone to, recitals, or other artists. She's an extremely prolific song composer, very inspired by texts, and also very prolific opera composer. So I really look forward to hearing about that. And Brittany is starting out her career. She's also a conductor. She's also a pianist, and sort of a one-woman show, I think, and also a fantastic composer of song and choral music. So if you both don't mind, maybe Lori, you want to start? Introduce yourself a little bit, and I think we'd love to hear kind of about your journey,
Yeah.
to becoming a composer from whatever your musical childhood was.
Yeah, I always I call myself an accidental composer because it was never on my radar. I always thought I would be a flutist. That was what all of my early training was in, and even my master's is in flute performance. And actually, until the quarantine, I hadn't touched my flute for about 25 years, but now my husband's busy writing songs and putting like folk songs and putting me into production as a flutist. So the flute's come out of its case again. But what happened was I had a really good friend who had been my roommate in Interlochen Music Camp, Lauren Wagner, and she was a fantastic soprano and she was going to make her first CD, and she told me I had to write songs for her CD, and I told her I couldn't because I didn't know how to write a song. And then she forced me, basically. And then I wrote my first song, and it came very easily to me. It was the setting of Sarah Teasdale's The Metropolitan Tower. And since that was in 1991, I just never stopped writing songs after that because I always say I found my voice writing for the voice. I had this, I guess, natural ability to know what works for the voice. And it was always very exciting for me to discover the world anew through the eyes of various poets. It's still exciting for me to discover new poetry and to try to serve as a translator, a musical translator, translating those poems into song the way I view the poems. So it just sort of happened. It was very I had three small children at the time I wrote my first song, and it was I think important to me to finally discover my own identity. Aside from being mommy, So I just love writing for the voice, and I don't love writing not for the voice. I can say that.
Do you have any pieces that are instrumental?
I had some before I wrote for voice. I was sort of trained in writing for music for film and theater. And before I had my kids, I did a lot of industrial films. And from that, I made a couple of little suites that were published. And I do have, I wrote a piece for the Baltimore Symphony a couple of years ago, a 4-minute piece that was commissioned. And so that's for orchestra. But honestly, I had so much trouble writing it without a text. The first thing I did was call the Baltimore Symphony and say, could I make it please for voice and orchestra? And they said, no, not now. So then I just tried to invent a film in my head and write film music because I only know how to respond to words or images. That's just the way I function as a composer. And still everything was horrible. So I just sat down with an Emily Dickinson poem, sketched out the whole thing, took the words away, and that's how I made that piece.
Oh
Um,
wow, that's
I
so
really,
interesting. So
yeah,
you're not a composer who comes from, say, a harmonic background, and you're really inspired by a chord or something. It's really from
never.
text and image.
It is always from text and image, and what is the best dramatic music that I can create to illuminate the text and to make it easy for the singer to sing those words so they can get the idea of the poem across. So I'm very much driven by that and only that.
I
Um,
think that really speaks to Thomas and my hearts as singers, because I think that's what drives a lot of singers too, is text for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, Lori, have you come across? I mean, it absolutely. I mean, it's one of it. Just what you said as a composer to get the point of the poem across and to
Yes.
create music that illuminates the inside of the poem. It's always about the story. It's always about the content. It's always about the journey that one should take. And yet, there seems to be both from the critical community as well as my dear colleagues or certainly people hiring. There's this incessant fetishism to just vocal sound and not really
Connected.
selling the song, as it were, or taking the poet perhaps as a source of inspiration as seriously as it could be. I mean, what that whole orbit is, rather than just, oh my goodness, that's a lovely young soprano, and what she reminds me of, blah blah blah, or something like that. Does that
Yeah.
drive you nuts or not? Do you come across that
Yeah.
very often?
Well, I know that certainly exists. I agree with you. But for me, it's just like I just keep doing my own thing. It's always about the words and constructing the melody from the words and from the words out, and never like I never start with a musical idea and then squish words into it. And I think that's very apparent when composers do that. And that drives me nuts more than, people focusing on sound or voice. I mean, it should be about the words. It should be about the communication.
Brittany, I see you nodding a lot, so I'd love to hear. Maybe tell us a little bit about your journey to composition and your thoughts on kind of writing for voice.
Yeah, sure. Composition, I guess, was kind of a late start for me. I was kind of always writing like songwriting in high school and middle school, but it was just kind of a thing, a hobby that I did on the side. And so by the time I got to Spelman College, I had to take, it was required of all music majors to take a composition course. And Dr. Kevin Johnson at the time asked everyone to arrange a Negro spiritual. And so that was essentially like my first kind of introduction into composition and writing for choir. And so that turned into a possible performance with the Spelman College Glee Club at the time. And that kind of just started my curiosity and love for writing for choir. And then, yeah, fast forward a couple years now, I just really enjoy writing for choir. I love writing art songs. Like Lori, I'm inspired by text. So art song has kind of created this newfound love for poetry. And I love poetry written by Black women authors. And so I've set, poetry by Maya Angelou and Gwendolyn Bennett. And so that has just been a new passion for me. I've also made a few friends who are poets. And so, just writing and possibly setting their poetry has been really, really exciting to do, and the collaboration aspect of it. But I think kind of like Lori, I like melody. I like something that's lyrical. I've never really been one to kind of just venture into the atonal world because that's just not my vibe. That's not my energy. So I think in a different life, I would have loved to be a singer. So I think I always write with that in mind. Would I like to sing this? Is this singable? So in my own privacy when I'm writing, yeah, I'm like, oh, I can sing this, but no. But yeah, so I think I just like writing from that vantage point, like, oh, if I were a singer, would I enjoy singing this? Would I enjoy performing this? And that's really, really been important to me in my writing. So.
Well, I mean, we do all have voices. So I know a lot of composers who are not singers, but they always make sure they can sing whatever they compose themselves to know that it's possible. Not that they would ever do that in public, but just because there's something exciting about then being able to sing your own piece. Whereas, if you don't play the cello, if you don't play the flute or whatever, then you can't, just kind of do that. But with singing, everyone has a voice. So it's very interesting that it really connects on a deeper level when you become a composer of vocal music. I have discovered from composers I know that it is a part of you, is a part of your soul, not just kind of, okay, I write vocal music, but it is has a deeper meaning because of that human connection, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, for each piece that I've written so far, like there's always been this type of connection, whether it's coming from the collaboration or the text or all the above. Like I can vividly remember, what it's like, composing each piece and, the meaning behind each one. So there's definitely power in that connection for sure.
Yeah.
Do you think of specific voice types when you guys write? Does a poem kind of feel like a guy poem or a girl poem or a tenor poem or a baritone? I mean, does that start coming into the framework? Yeah, Lori.
Yeah, definitely some texts are more, I guess, meant to be sung by a woman or a man, although I was listening back to your wonderful show, Christy, about there is no gender in music this morning. And the piece that's on there of mine is a setting of Sarah Teasdale's poem, The Kiss, which was written by a woman, Sarah Teasdale, about a kiss that she had envisioned. Yet I had William Sharp singing it, and I changed the gender in the poem from him to her. And I was thinking about that this morning because I think maybe that was a mistake. I mean, I think it works equally well in terms of voice type or singability, but in terms of approaching the poem itself, it might be that maybe this is very sexist to say, but that maybe and maybe it's wrong, or maybe it's not even true, but maybe a woman was thinking more about what the kiss might be than a man might be thinking about it. I don't know, but maybe that's
Is there
irrelevant.
an argument that a man thinking about what a woman might think the kiss would be a good process for the man to think about before he kisses?
Maybe.
I love singing songs from girls and women's perspective. I mean, especially in the Folket in the Desk, kind of Wunderhorn, especially. I've chosen some songs that I very much felt it was important for a guy to sing as an empathetic moment.
Yeah.
Of the other sex, as it were, dealing with the same inner emotions. And I think that's, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, this whole gender preoccupation is very much 20th and 21st century, 19th century. It's very funny that the Dichterliebe of Schumann was premiered by a woman, and Frauenliebe und Leben by Clara Schumann was premiered by a man, with Clara playing the piano. So I think we need to, again, if we're really focused on story, maybe that isn't such a big deal. But I was actually thinking more about just the timbre, just that sound of the words. Whether sometimes it sounds like the crackling guy thing, or the lyric woman thing, or a crackly woman thing.
Yeah. For me, actually, because it doesn't make that much, the timbre doesn't make that much difference in my songs as opposed to opera. And that's why I think that, because the essence of my music is really in the way the melody is constructed. So I think as long as it fits the singer's voice, it can work equally well for any timbre, in most cases, I mean, sometimes it just doesn't sound good. But so I guess the answer is, no, I guess. It can work.
Lori, before we go on, Lori, how many songs have you written?
Well, it's hard to keep track, but because I don't have in my database that I finally had somebody make, there were some duplicates, but it's over 300. It's like 310, something like
Fantastic. And are they all publicly available if somebody wanted them in some way? In other words, published either privately or publicly?
Yes. Yeah. Either
I love it.
Glendower or my site on Musiconeo, where I
I really want to give it a shout out to my very, very dear and old friend Glendower Jones at Classical Vocal Reprints. This guy, you'll find his URL and information on everybody's website, and certainly ours. He is a go-to guy for the music that you can't find. We get email quite a bit saying, love this song, or heard about it, or where can we find the music, and so forth. Glendower is always your first stop shopping, and he's also one of the nicest men and knowledgeable men on the face of the planet in song repertoire. And it was Glendower who sent me unsolicited 6 small of his printed volumes of your songs, Lori. I don't know how long ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and said, you need to look at these songs. Now, I want you to know I looked at them, and I want to publicly apologize that I haven't ever, you get stuck in a cycle, and there's been the Mahler and the Schubert and the Song of America things. I'm a huge fan of your work, and I just think your songs are wonderful, and it's high bloody time I got my lips around some of them. So I'm inspired by this. And Brittany, that comes as a warning to you. Anyway, Glendower Jones, wonderful. Where were we in the questions? It's time for Brittany to ask. And
well, I was going to throw out the question of, talking about the title of this program, There Is No Gender in Music. I'll throw this your way, Brittany. Do people, I mean, I imagine that we all kind of believe that, but yeah, I would like to hear you riff on that idea, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ambitious, thought, but I think everyone's experience is different. And that's initially why I started using B.E. Boykin instead of Brittany. My initial start into composition was just a little rocky, and I felt like people were focused more on the fact that I was a woman and that I was a Black woman as opposed to my music. So I was like, well, let me try to just, remove all of that and just hopefully get them to try to focus on the music instead. So that I decided to use B.E. Boykin instead. And so I think that helped. And then now, ironically, people are like, oh, well, there's no gender in music, so you can go back to using Brittany if you want. And I'm like, well, I mean, I think, that's, it just depends. But I think now, I'm okay with using my name as B.E. Boykin because it's still my name, and as a Black woman composer, I think it's just, it's just really important to just kind of just own who you are, no matter what name you're using. And that kind of comes through, you know, hopefully in the music. And I think that's true for anyone, for any composer. So I think it's just okay for the composer to define who they are, you know, and let it be their choice.
Yeah.
Good
I
for
mean,
you.
I always find myself kind of on that line of we want women composers to just be composers, but then again, we also want to make sure that we're paying attention to women composers more. So how do we do that correctly? I mean, you could both probably have opinions on this that we, and this is the same with Black composers, with Latinx composers, with people of color. And you know, we want to have our times when we're just focused on making sure those people have their music performed, but at the same time that it's not really special. They're part of the tapestry of the music for our country, internationally, etc. If either one of you want to talk on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, no, I think it's in terms of there is no gender. I think that that is the ideal, and I think it would also be ideal if there were no race in music too. But it's so important, especially in this moment. I assume you would agree, Brittany, that you know, we all recognize the the horrible racism that's gone on in America since its founding. You know, and try to fix the system somehow. And you know, NATS, you know, the organization for singing teachers, you know, we've just started a new mentoring for young art song composers. And this first year is devoted to mentoring African American composers to try to, you know, recognize the problem that exists.
Yeah, and
I
to
think this.
add
I
to,
think if I jump in here and Brittany go on to, it's not just the
yeah,
problem. It's you know, one of the most glorious canons of identification of Americanism is
Mhm.
through the eyes of the African American creative community for the last 300 years,
Yep.
and this is what has been woefully, obscenely ignored, and there have been a few glimpses of white publics embracing, whether it was the Grant Still moment or the William Dawson moment through history, but it's never had any. It just hasn't had the traction it should have. And I guess if I take that back to the women, what I love about the provocative idea, there's no gender in music. If you just played a piece of music, should one be able to identify that that's a woman or a man composer? Is it even legitimate? Does it really matter? When I say, well, I like to celebrate the canon of women's creativity, both poetic and music, you know, I'm always afraid that's going to sound patronizing, but the point is, it's human creativity, and we're all humans first and foremost, and we have these human stories, and they're in music and they're in poetry. Oh, and guess what, folks, guys, get over it. Women have the same power, and then the same amazing thing. And so when we play something and you say, did you know who composed that? And they, well, no, but it was certainly beautiful. Well, it was a woman. Oh my God, that couldn't, it's just nonsense. It's just absolutely nonsense. And I hope this is a tipping point that we can break through the cultural and the racial and the gender barriers that we've artificially put up, so that we can truly identify what is a gender moment or what is a racial moment or a cultural moment. I'm not going to go so far as to say that musical elements of the African American culture are not identifiable. I think they're quite identifiable, gloriously identifiable, and maybe the same with gender. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming from in all of this show stuff. I interrupted you, Brittany. Go for it.
No, I was just going to add, I mean, I think, when this idea of there's no gender in music, just like, Lori was saying, that's tied to race and all these different kind of social constructs. We have to think about the systemic barriers, like you said, that have been in place, and that comes with opportunity and the lack of opportunity that certain composers have or have not had. When I think about Florence Price and her, the premiere with the symphony, and how that kind of came and went, as far as her career with the Chicago Symphony. But, it was like, Julia Perry, another one, you know, who had all these wonderful opportunities to perform her music around the globe. And then in the last few months of her life, you know, was pleading to publishers for, you know, opportunities to publish her music. And they kind of just said, oh, well, you know, just be patient, we'll let you know. And then she ended up passing away. And I just think, you know, it's just opportunity is tied to visibility. And so when we kind of, you know, have those systems in place and that kind of prohibit certain composers from different backgrounds and gender identities from being visible to the world, it's like, well, what does that message say? Yeah, like,
Right.
so I just think we have to take better action when it comes to reevaluating what those systems are and being intentional about fixing those.
Christy, can I throw, ladies, I'm going to definitely either run out of light, be eaten by a bear, or lose battery. So before I go, Christy, as you were writing this show, the radio show, and doing all the research and collecting all these things, were there threads that you were after? Are there threads that showed up that you wanted to get? Were you trying to get a cross-generational picture of women's creativity, or were you looking for weddings between women composer, women poetry? You know, what was your process in putting the show together?
Well, at first I just went in kind of curious about, you know, who's out there besides Amy Beach, because we've all heard of Amy Beach and she's wonderful. And then, of course, contemporary composers like Lori, I already knew about Lori. I knew about, you know, Libby Larsen and some other American female composers.
Jennifer Higdon.
Yeah, Jennifer Higdon, exactly. But there was kind of this time before Amy Beach that I thought, well, women have always been creative. And so what happened there? And what I discovered was women were very innovative. They were publishing a lot of pop music. They were publishing a lot of kind of parlor songs. Since they weren't being performed with orchestras, they weren't being performed with major operatic singers, they were just finding opportunities to write music that could be performed anywhere and to sell it. And in a lot of cases, they were women whose husband had passed away, or women whose husband was kind of no longer there anymore, and they had to support the family themselves. So that's the case with Carrie Jacobs Bond, who wrote some really fantastic parlor songs, and quite funny ones actually, and that she had to support her family, and she realized she was quite good at composing and she loved composing, and so she wrote these 1-minute songs and she was really popular in the parlor song, on the parlor song scene, if you can say, in the mid 19th century. But what I discovered really was that women were innovative. They needed to be creative. We want to be creative, so they found a way to do it in a society that was controlled by men who believed that women's voices were not important in the creative sphere. And that was very inspiring to me, to see that no matter what, you know, people are going to do what they need to do and what they're passionate about. And then even with Amy Beach, you know, her husband was not very supportive of her composition lifestyle.
By the way,
and
that is why in
yeah.
history she's known as Mrs. H.H. Beach. That was a compromise on his part, and that she could publish as long as she said Mrs. H.H. Beach. And it wasn't until after either he died or either she got launched or became obvious that she was even identified as Amy Beach.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
hello?
Yeah. And when we think about this is like 100 years ago. We're thinking about, you know, 100 years ago, women got the vote in America, and 100 years ago, this is the kind of things that women were dealing with. We forget how far we have come in, you know, in women's rights in the past century. And
well, gee, wouldn't it be lovely if we had an equal rights amendment? Ladies, can I ask another question before I disappear here? As I am disappearing, I feel like Hoffman in Hoffman's Erzählung, you know, mon spectre. Anyway, I'm fading. Do you feel that you have been disadvantaged at times because you're women? And that's going to be a loaded question to you, Brittany, but because I want to speak to the women issue first. But I mean, it's really you as a woman. Do you think other people, have you seen other people that you thought were of equal or lesser talent that actually got a better chance because they were men? Has that happened to you guys?
Do you want to go first, Brittany?
Sure, I can go first. I think yes. Early on, I will say yes. I think I did see that, you know, a lot of my male colleagues and friends who are still my friends to today, were getting more opportunities to publish, to have their music performed. But I didn't know why exactly. I just knew that, you know, I was trying to also talk to the same people, and it was more of like, oh, that's cute, you know, keep writing, you know, keep doing your thing. And I was just like, oh, okay. But it wasn't ever said directly like, oh, you can't do this because you're a woman. It was kind of indirect, but also a slight like, oh, you should go teach music to little kids or something like that. It was always like, what does that mean? But yeah, I do think that, I mean, and that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So it wasn't like it was, you know, 100 years ago. It was recent. So yeah, that's been my experience a little bit.
Yeah, for me, I've always felt it that maybe I lost out on some opportunities, or not because I was a woman, but because I was a melodist. You know, and there is, I still think, you know, somewhat of a prejudice against like beautiful music or something like that, you know, and I'm not edgy enough. I'm not avant-garde enough. For me, it's impossible to know whether, you know, being a woman has changed things or not. I think in some respects, you know, recently being a woman is probably a very good advantage, you know, in terms of people looking to diversify. But I always felt like the prejudice, if there was any, was against melodic music.
And if I can add to that, I would also say that there was prejudice, at least for me, because I never studied composition formally. So it was, yeah, it was always like, oh, well, you haven't taken lessons, you don't have any degrees in composition, so you should try to do something else. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah, so, but I would like to believe that there are male composers out there who love melody and beautiful things. So, but it's just been interesting to kind of deal with that as well.
What do you three, and I really am going to have to sign off here. What do you three think about the proposition that the song recital is dead? And is your music and what you want to do, is it dependent upon a recital atmosphere, or do you think there should be more recordings, or how can we inspire the younger generation? That's kind of my mantra right now, is empower, enable, and embrace. You know, I mean, how can we, I think the digital revolution is going to help. And I think IDAGIO is going to help. And I think self-producing is all wonderful. But how do we get more people to just self-understood, organically understand that the conversation between poetic thought and musical thought is a very, very healthy and exciting and wonderful and interesting thing to happen?
I have an idea. Yeah, can I?
Yes, please tell me.
For me, I wish I knew how to execute this, but you know, I think so many people of my generation learned about classical music through cartoons, and I really want to start the Art Song Cartoon Network for kids. And then I think that might solve part of the problem. I just don't know how to do it.
Oh, I love it. What a great idea.
If anyone had any ideas, you know, but I think that music video, I mean, everyone's attention span is so short, which would make it perfect kind of for art song as opposed to Wagner, you know, and if we have, especially with COVID now, there are more, we all have to become filmmakers and get the idea of a song across through film and through video could be a very exciting thing, I think.
Food for thought.
Yep.
Brittany, what do you think?
Yeah, Brittany, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just share. I mean, I received this little bit of advice from Dorothy Redmore at the African American Art Song Alliance Festival years ago, and that was literally kind of maybe my little push to really pursue composition. And I asked her, I was like, well, you know, as a woman, as a Black woman, you know, and I really want to write, but you know, I'm just not sure, like, what advice would you give? And she just said, if you want to write, sweetheart, just write. And so, I
Oh
mean, it
man,
was just very simple, but it was very prophetic. And that literally was like my push into like, okay, like I'm gonna do this, like, you know, and just figure it out. And hopefully maybe, you know, along the way, you know, people will help. But I would just say that to the younger generation, like, you know, if you really want to write and you really want to compose, just do it. You know, there are people out there who are willing to help you and to guide you. And it's just a matter of time before you find and meet those people. So just do it.
And if you know performers too that you're close with, then they can always perform your music until, you know, you start to have a name that people will contact you and then ask you for the score. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and I just want to say I think it's very interesting that both of you are not, you're both quote unquote not formally trained, because I'm also a singer and I perform a lot of experimental and new music, and I find that a lot of composers today who do have formal training, they don't really get trained in how to write for voice.
That's true.
And and I end up teaching composers a lot about how to write for voice because they've gone through learning how to write for the entire orchestra, every single instrument, they know that. But the first question I'm always getting is, what's your range? And sometimes that's the only question. And it's quite annoying. I never answer because I know then they're going to put my top note and my lowest note in the piece. And often they're going to be long notes. And that's just not how the voice functions. So I'll give them kind of a very long-winded version of that. But Lori, you look like you
that
want to
has
say something.
totally been my experience in the last 4 or 5 years. I've done, I don't know, 3 world premieres and several song cycles and this and that sort of thing, and very, especially the stage works. You know, the exactly how you described it. It's and it's sort of, and in fact, you even find yourself telling the composer, "Yeah, thank you very much for the high note, but why are there 6? You
Yeah.
know, why don't we do 1, maybe 2?" But you know, just to get the point across. I mean, what is the essence of what this emotional moment is for you in the aria? And then you find yourself, you know, disguised as if I don't compose for anything, but it seems kind of self-understood. Never mind. Good points. What
No,
do you
but
guys think?
always learn from, I mean, when I first started writing, I did take composition lessons at Yale. I just don't have a degree in it. And I did feel very self-conscious about that. And, you know, I'm so proud of my daughter, Diana Rosenblum, who's a fantastic composer. And she's finishing her PhD in composition at Eastman. And her
Wow.
style is so different than mine. She writes a lot of 12-tone music, and she is driven by theoretical ideas. And yet she has a great sense of drama and humor and intellect, and it's all combined in works that are very inspiring to me and totally out of my realm of work, you know, so it's very interesting. But I think, you know, anyone who's writing for voice should always listen to the singers and take their advice and learn from them. And even now, I mean, I always get emails from singers that say, oh, I love this set, but I can't sing this note. Can I have another note? And I give them another note, you know. And so last night I get like these emergency emails like, I can't sing the note in measure 34, you know, what should I do? And I just say, okay, why don't you take that one up an octave or whatever? And then I go on my website and I say, here's an alternate note for measure 34 for any
That's
tempo.
the great thing with living composers. You can do that. Just send the composer an email.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's always, you know, I always adopt it, and I always say this, Lauren Wagner's motto: a happy singer is a good singer. And you don't want the singer to be so overwhelmed with technical absurdities that they cannot communicate the text. You know, it has to be a singable line.
Yeah, I mean, with that, I just think a lot of times, depending on the piece, if the melody is kind of all over the place and it's not even really maybe a melody, I just think it takes away from the text.
Mhm.
And, you know, I just think I try to think about, you know, respecting the author, obviously, and respecting the piece that, you know, I'm trying to set. But I'm hoping that I can just make melody and, the lyrics kind of flow together so that it can convey the message, it can convey the story, because that's important. That's the whole thing about, being able to use your voice. You're using beautiful music and melody, but you're also telling a story with the text. So I just think that that's really, really important.
Can I ask you a question, Brittany?
Sure.
When I have always found it difficult, I'm getting better at it, but I find it very difficult to write for chorus as opposed to, unless it's in an opera where there are characters, and then it's no problem. But do you find a big difference between writing for chorus, since that's where you began, and writing for soloist in terms of your approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe initially, I think my comfort is still, or maybe even still, my comfort is still for choir. And yeah, I think I hear those things very, very differently. I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking like one voice, or, and piano is just kind of limiting, the harmonies that I'm hearing. So I just think sometimes choir is just able to kind of fill that out a little bit better. But yeah, I think about those just differently. Yeah.
It has been very challenging for me to learn how to write for choir, because I'm so, to sort of harness the different voice type forces so where each one sort of can have a commentary on the text, but having them not all sing in unison, which would be very boring, but how do you make the words understandable while using the different forces of a chorus is very difficult, I find.
Yeah. Well,
Brittany?
I think, yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just going to ask you, do you have any operas in mind that you would like to write?
Well, I was just about to say that.
Okay.
Writing for opera and I guess orchestra has been challenging. I mean, I have some things that I'm working on, but I think, I would like a little bit of just guidance and help with that. But, then I'm like, well, maybe I should just do it. But I would love to, write something for either chamber opera or, big orchestral work. I would love to venture into that eventually. So that has been on my list of to-dos, to try and push my compositional voice and see if I can manage to do that. So that is the goal eventually.
Right.
That's cool.
How's the commissioning world?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, Lori, you just finished an opera, right?
Well, I'm orchestrating it now. It's a one-act chamber opera, and it's based on a memoir by Leah Lax, who grew up in, I always get it confused between Dallas and Houston, I think in Dallas. And she was married, entered into an arranged marriage when she was 19. She was gay, but she didn't know what to do about it, or she didn't want to reveal it. So she thought if she became an Orthodox Jew, that might solve her issues. And she did enter into this arranged marriage. And for the 10 years after she got married, she had 7 children and then 1 abortion, and stayed married for 30 years before finding the courage to live her truth. And she wrote this amazing memoir, and I was very attracted to it. I thought it was so unique and honest. And I met with her and in person in the days when one could actually meet with people. And she agreed to rewrite the memoir as a libretto for me. And so I actually had like a backlog of commissions, and it was my dream to sort of get through those so that I could just write Uncovered. And then I also have another opera in progress, Ludlow, with a libretto by David Mason, who did my Scarlet Letter libretto. And that is about immigration in America, seen through the lens of the 1914 Colorado mining town disaster at Ludlow. So basically, I get a lot of commissions, but I can't accept all of them, because now my goal is to finish Uncovered and then finish Ludlow, even though that's not commissioned, but I do want to finish it. But
that's great. I mean, you're telling so many American stories through your music from each perspective.
Yeah, that's my goal. And also, it's been interesting. I like to focus on strong women as well. In Scarlet Letter, Hester Prynne was such. I mean, she was, as my director Beth Greenberg likes to say, America's first single mother. she supported her child, you know, through her embroidery. And she ironically, she was the strong one in the tale. She was the one supposed to be shamed for the adultery, but the men around her are disintegrating, one through obsessive jealousness and the other through hypocrisy. And she was the one who was the real moral force of the story. So.
Brittany, you just finished 14 Maya Angelou settings, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yeah. So that actually was not a commission. That was like my first art song project that I started a couple years ago with the Art Song or African American Art Song Alliance conference. And so I just finished that recently. So it's currently being edited and we have to go through approvals, but I'm hoping to release it maybe in October. COVID has slowed everything down as far as production. So, but yes, it is finally done. So I'm so excited to share that with the world.
I wanted to ask, I mean, it's obvious why anyone would be drawn to Maya Angelou's poetry, but if you have a personal connection story that you want to tell, or how you decided on, it has to be these 14 poems, it couldn't just be like these 5, or it's a passion project, I assume.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone knows like her kind of most famous poems, but I bought a book of her collection and I was just flipping through and I noticed some of the shorter kind of like haiku-like poems. And so these are essentially all of, or not all, but majority of them I kind of just like highlighted and tried to connect them based on themes. And so they're all very short poems. So because of that, all the songs are relatively short, like maybe a minute or a minute and some change. So I was just drawn to those kind of smaller pieces that she's done that were just kind of really beautiful in their own way. And I was really passionate about thinking, well, how can I connect these themes to humanity? And so they're all kind of talking about emotions or time. And so I was just thinking about, well, these can kind of be like little moments for people to kind of identify with. So yes, they're a collection, but I'm telling people specifically, they don't have to do all of them. They can kind of just pick whatever they want and whatever they resonate with, and they can perform them in that way in whatever order they want. So so they're just kind of really, really nice and beautiful pieces that she's written that I wanted to highlight.
They are beautiful. I mean, that's how I was drawn to your compositions to begin with, because I heard 2 of them at the African American Art Song Alliance in 2017, and they just blew me away. So I'm so excited that you've written more. And before we go, I want to ask each of you, what would be kind of like your dream project, or like dream collaboration with a poet, or I don't know, what is kind of like, oh, if I could just do that, that would be so amazing. That's a very open-ended question, but I'd love to hear more about what your passions are.
Well, for me, I really want to finish Ludlow. That would be my my dream before I die. That's, you know, it's a big opera. That's about it. Then I want to
How
play
is
with.
it working? I mean, I know David Mason a little bit, and I know that you and David Mason have done some other
Yeah,
collaborations. I assume he's really great. You guys really have a good chemistry together.
absolutely. Yeah, but
Yeah.
he moved to Tasmania last year.
Wow.
His wife is from there, and they live in a little house overlooking the sea in Tasmania. But that's okay. He wrote the libretto. I actually haven't touched. I wrote scene 1 back in 2012, I believe, and I haven't touched it since then. Fortunately, I found where all of my notes are, you know, and I have it by the piano. And as soon as I finish whatever I'm working on now, that's the next big thing.
All right, Brittany, you're up. What do you?
I'll give you the short list. I have so many things I want to do. One of them would be to have the opportunity to set some of Audre Lorde's text. That would be amazing. Of course, people probably don't know, but I guess there are certain permissions involved that prohibit composers from setting her text. So that would be an ultimate goal, and like just mind-boggling collaboration if that were possible. So I'm praying for that one day. But of course, I would love to work with Tyler Perry or Ava DuVernay and, write for, any film, TV show ever. Like, I just feel like I'm ready to kind of dabble in film scoring. And of course, Lori's inspired me to possibly work on a chamber opera. So I have a long list of things that I want to do. So I'm just excited that, it's just, yeah, I'm just excited to write and compose.
Well, we're excited to listen. So, Lori?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. I used to be very scared of orchestration because I hadn't done it in a long time since my film and theater days. And then I ran into Jennifer Higdon at an opera conference, and I just assumed that she was just this amazingly naturally brilliant orchestrator. But she said something to me that resonated, and it was like she had to work very hard on it. And it was like, oh, I just have to work hard, and then I'm going to get better. And and I reorchestrated Scarlet Letter 3 times, and it was when I was doing my Three Feathers opera with Dana Gioia that it was like a switch turned on in my head, and instead of me being completely scared of this opportunity, everything was illuminated, and it became I was in charge of this, and it was just another layer of interpretation that I could add with the instruments, and now it's just like fun. So it just, if you keep doing it, you will get better, is what I learned.
Well, I think that's almost a great ending point for all of us about everything. I don't know. We always think that the people we admire so much, they just sort of get up and that's what happens. It's like in the singer's world, people think if you're a singer, you just sort of get up in the morning and you're in a pretty good mood and you just and everything just sort of happens. And I don't know who said it was 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. I don't know.
Was that Edison?
Well, I think what you both have so wonderfully articulated tonight is one, the joy and the passion to do what you were born to do, and God bless. That's first and foremost. But secondly, is this resilience that the mountain is going to have different glaciers, and you're going to find yourself on different ones, and sometimes two at the same time as a composer, if that's the right analogy. But the point is to just simply keep putting yourself in the position that inspiration illuminates what you're really trying to do, and that's what you both do in your equal generations. And ladies and gentlemen, and if you would like to look at the playlist that especially Lori put together, is fantastic, and we have some other links to Brittany's music as well. This will be a very enlightening and enjoyable excursion into the sounds of today, and that's very, very exciting. You ladies are wonderful. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Christy, you're a joy. You have any closing thoughts for us?
No, I just would encourage everyone to go and listen to the music of these two wonderful composers. So we're just so thrilled you could join us, and keep writing, keep composing.
Well,
Beautiful.
thank you so much.
Anyway, thank you for joining us. It was wonderful. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for putting up with all the various erratic connections, especially on my part. I will do my best not to be stuck in the woods next time. But thank you for your patience. And this has been a wonderful show. You ladies are great, all of you. And onward, song and beyond. See you next week.